Hello, this is Addis News. I'm Solomon Danye. Thanks for joining me. Ethiopian National Defense Force discloses the terrorist TPLF insurgents in Raya Front are being hit by the Amhara Special Force and the National Defense Forces. Briefing a journalist on current affairs, Public Relations Director of Ethiopian National Defense Force, Colonel Getnet Adana, highlighted the attempts of the terrorist TPLF rebels in Afar and Mille fronts have been defended well by the Ethiopian forces.
ስለዚህም ይሄንን ኃይል በወሬ ሳይረበሽ ሰው መፋለም መቻል አለበት.
This ill act of the group is being defended, and we are saying its wishes couldn't be met. The Defense Force, the militias and the federal police are jointly taking measures against the aggressions. The unilateral ceasefire declared by the Ethiopian government couldn't get appropriate response from the other side. It was right political decision, but the terrorist group is trying hard to disrupt normalcy of the country.
The Ethiopian government vows to defend historical sites from the TPLF insurgents. In a statement the Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued today, the government stated that despite the unilateral ceasefire declared by the government, the TPLF forces have turned a deaf ear to the call by the international community to cease all sorts of hostility and allow the delivery of humanitarian assistance to the people in need and for farmers in the region to make use of the rainy season. Due to the recent attacks by the force in some areas in the Amhara region, the people are concerned about the possible destruction of religious and other institutions by the TPLF, which signify the centuries-old identity, religion and culture of the Ethiopian people. His concern stems from the fact that the TPLF has done a lot of destruction over the past 8 months. The government will take all the necessary measures to ensure that these sacred places and other institutions are well protected and call on the international community to condemn this heinous act of the TPLF, the statement said. Political analysts argue the US is plotting to restore the TPLF rebels back to power. The renowned California State University professor Alamayo Gebremariam says the recent US-aid administrator Samantha Power's visit to Ethiopia was part of that plot. Alamayo argued Samantha Power has a good track record of orchestrating war in Libya and Syria, and her recent visit to Ethiopia was not different.
The U.S. is watching with great alarm as a conflict that began in Tigray is now beginning to spread.
USAID Administrator Samantha Power recently visited Ethiopia after spending days in Sudan. Power's mission of visit to Ethiopia was said to be a fresh diplomatic push for negotiations between the Ethiopian government and the TPLF rebel forces to resolve the conflict. Ethiopians who are active in the social media platforms have been, however, protesting her visit, referring to the content of her tweets before her arrival to Addis earlier this week. The renowned political scientist at California State University, Alamayo Gebremariam, wrote, "Samantha is a goddess and maker of war to Ethiopia." Referring to a short video which Samantha speaks about the Tigray crisis on the social media, Professor Alamayo says Power boldly declared war in Ethiopia, saying all options are on the table because 900,000 people are on the verge of famine in Tigray. Here is what she said in the video.
Systematic sexual violence, mass atrocities, and the denial of food as a weapon of war. That's what we're talking about here. So to your question, every option is on the table because our estimates are that 900,000 people in Tigray are at risk of famine. And that is not something we say lightly or our international partners say lightly. You know, the F word is a big deal.
Referring back to her profile, Professor Alamayo argues Samantha Power was nothing but the harbinger of war on Syria and Libya. Now Alamayo writes she's trying to orchestrate war in Ethiopia. While Professor Alamayo and other Ethiopians classify Power as a warmonger expert, others say she is a world-renowned voice of conscience and moral clarity. President Biden said in a statement when he appointed her, she stands for the dignity and humanity of all people.
I've asked Ambassador Samantha Power to serve as the next administrator of the U.S. Agency for International Development. There is simply no one better to ensure our development agenda is a core pillar of our foreign policy. Sam is one of our country's most respected voices on humanitarian issues, and I have seen both her passion and her principles firsthand.
The controversial USAID administrator concluded her visit and went back to her country. And time will tell whether Power's visit will have any significance to alleviate the current crisis in Tigray and beyond within Ethiopia.
Office of the Prime Minister dismisses accusations of intentionally blocking aid routes and imposing bureaucratic procedures to prevent unfettered access to the state of Tigray. In its weekly press briefing, the office also indicts the TPLF of using economic sabotage and disseminating false propaganda to terrorize the people of Ethiopia and mislead the international community. Though the government witnesses encroachments by the TPLF in the Amhara and Afar regional states, the office denies the advancement of forces of the clique to the town of Voltaire in the state of Amhara. With more on this story.
Together with their operatives, they have orchestrated economic sabotage through which there has been a hoarding of iron estimated by the federal police to be worth 5 billion. And they continue to use their operatives abroad to disseminate false propaganda online, attempting to incite fear about the country while influencing ill-informed policymakers with a distorted narrative.
The government of Ethiopia has been accusing the TPLF of launching attacks against the Amhara and Afar states to obstruct delivery of humanitarian aid. Some international organizations and governments, on the contrary, blamed the government for forbidding unfettered access to aid organizations. Briefing journalist Thursday, Press Secretary Bilene Seyum dismisses the accusation as baseless.
The other problematic framing which is being concocted is that the Tigray region is under a siege or a blockade by the government. And this framing is also why the TPLF waged a confrontation on the Afar entry point for humanitarian assistance. And this has been done to give the impression that the government is blocking humanitarian assistance throughout that route, thereby facilitating the demands for the opening up of other routes that in a way would be treated as a no man's land and entry point. Fortunately, as a sovereign nation, the Ethiopian government determines which route is more suitable to deliver its responsibility of humanitarian assistance. And those who want corridors for weapons and non-humanitarian goods to be routed to them continue to try and manipulate the realities on the ground in attempts to convince the world that unfettered access is not happening.
The press secretary indicts the TPLF of insurgency, but she denies reports of the TPLF forces advancing far from where they were supposed to be kept.
You talk about advancements and TPLF taking hold of certain parts of the Amhara region, Waldia and whatsoever. And I think it's important here again, which I was referring to earlier on in terms of characteristics and manifestations of terrorism, because there is overt terrorism, which is provocations. You go with the gun, you terrorize people in that way, you loot properties. The other form of terrorism is the psychological terrorism, which is giving the impression that you're bigger than what you are and seeding doubts within communities to give them the impression that there is something threatening that is coming towards them. The information that I have with regards to Waldia is that there is no such threat at this point in time from the TPLF.
The press secretary on her weekly briefing reproached the international media for their misuse of phrases and words of government leaders to blow things out of proportion.
They have misconstrued the statements that have been made by the leadership as directed towards the people of Tigray. So words used by the leadership are being pulled out of context to fit an agenda that rings the sirens of dehumanizing rhetoric that has been referred to. And it's very clear to those that read these statements and to those that push the alarm that such statements are directed at the TPLF organization as a terrorist organization rather than the people of Tigray. So let's not also forget in this regard that both former President Obama and Vice President John Kerry have used similar terminology and phrases in the threat posed by ISIL as a terrorist organization.
The press secretary pointed out that more than 300,000 people have been displaced from the states of Amhara and Afar because of continued encroachments of the TPLF. Joint Council of Ethiopian political parties calls on the international community to take a positive outlook on the current situation in Ethiopia. This came when the council briefed Addis Ababa diplomatic community on current national issues. Kasonjane reports.
During the briefing held in Addis, Joint Council of Ethiopian political parties said, Ethiopians are a nation that has gone through the hardships of the past. She said the TPLF regime was dividing Ethiopian psychology during its rule for more than 2 decades and a half across the nation.
During which Ethiopia existed as a state, has passed through many ups and downs and difficult times. By the grace of God and the unity of the gallant Ethiopian people, Ethiopia was able to preserve its independence from foreign invaders and resolve its internal conflicts whenever such conflicts arose. The raw material for a society is the mentality. However, the TPLF vanquished the people's particulars out of the people mind and marked psychological damage, emotional stress, hatred, division, and impacted compounded double negativity within the community. Self-esteem was killed by ethnicity. The original truth is eradicated. TPLF attempted controlling the thinking of the people until they surrendered for TPLF's idea and consequently controlled regional states were created.
She also indicated that no country tolerates a defense attack, highlighting the international community must take a positive outlook on the current situation in Ethiopia. She further added it is important to understand that Ethiopians do not compromise on their sovereignty and are demonstrating unwavering unity in this decisive time.
We, the Ethiopian political parties, as well pursue no different stand than that of the entire population of the country and stand united to withstand the challenge our country is currently faced with. We need to remind that Africa remains not the same dark continent as perceived in the past by many. Rather, it's a continent with more than 1 billion proud people. As part of Africa, Ethiopia is a country with more than 110 million brilliant-minded, patriotic people who can carefully and wisely manage their internal affairs. An attempt to make out of Ethiopia another failed state is not tolerated by any means.
More than 100 million patriotic Ethiopians will not compromise on their sovereignty, she said. Those who say Ethiopia will fall apart do not understand the past history and present status of the country and its people.
The National Risk Disaster Management Commission said it is not appropriate to use the Humera corridor to provide humanitarian assistance to Tigray regional state. The Commission also calls on the international community to condemn TPLF's belligerence to obstruct the effort of providing humanitarian assistance to vulnerable people in the region, he added.
The federal government of Ethiopia has rejected foreign demand to open the Humera corridor to deliver humanitarian assistance in Tigray region. Talking to ETV, the National Disaster Risk Management Commissioner Mitiku Kasa said Ethiopia is using Port Djibouti to provide humanitarian assistance. According to the commissioner, there are a number of factors that make the Humera corridor an efficient humanitarian aid route into Tigray.
Humera corridor, related with using Port Sudan, transporting humanitarian assistance by using plane is too expensive. Thus, it may be possible to transport it by using trucks. However, the distance from Port Sudan in Mekelle covers over 1,300 kilometers. The Port Djibouti only covers 781 kilometers into Mekelle. There is 525 kilometer difference. This difference is equivalent to the distance between Addis Ababa and Harar. So, the Humera corridor will incur additional cost and time. Thus now we are using Port Djibouti. Our humanitarian aid partners have centers in Adama, Kombolcha and Samara towns. Using Port Sudan is not feasible comparing with Port Djibouti.
Mitiku added the request of opening the Humera corridor is not related with the supply and providing humanitarian assistance, but political interest. Besides, some authors explained the demand of use of Humera corridor is a political will because of its strategic significance to the TPLF activities. On Humera and West Tigray region, Wasanello Terla and Mogas Kalkalacho reported on the Horn of Africa inside that the TPLF needs Wolkite for two reasons. Strategically, controlling it would offer TPLF access to the outside world through Sudan. Wolkite is also essential for the flow of arms and finance for TPLF to prevail in a sustained conflict with the government and declare an independent Tigray with the international border. Economically, Wolkite is rich in fertile land where mechanized agriculture can produce surplus consumables and export items including sesame seeds, incessant cotton, and valuable minerals. In 1991, TPLF annexed the Wolkite territory to the Tigray regional state and called it West Tigray. Later in 1995, it tried to legitimize the annexation by introducing Ethiopia's current constitution, which divided the country into ethnic regions. The opposition from the Amhara inhabitants of Wolkite was swift and fierce. Hence, TPLF is desperately trying to regain the fertile lands of Wolkite. It illegally snatched in 1991 and lost of the Amharas when it was removed from power in 2020, the writers stressed. The TPLF gangs attacked the northern command base of the Ethiopian National Defense Force stationed in Tigray on November 4, 2020. Some Tigrayan commanders in the National Army turned against their unsuspecting fellow soldiers from other ethnic groups. This conflict has been marred by atrocities and human rights abuses. More than 1,500 Amhara in the town of Maikadra were massacred by TPLF-affiliated forces, it was learned. The writers pointed after committing such acts of unspeakable barbarity, the perpetrators fled westwards, mingling with the flood of refugees streaming into the Sudan. The TPLF fighters and its lobbyists are striving hard to create a passage in Humera corridor to inject rifles, artillery, and other weapons to create instabilities, it was learned.
Ethiopia secured $90 million from power export to neighboring countries over the concluded 2013 Ethiopian budget year. Ethiopian Electric Power Communication Director Mogas Makonnen told Ethiopian News Agency that the country has earned more than $90 million from exported power to neighboring countries, exceeding its target. The country mainly sold power to Sudan and Djibouti. The country also earned over $13.2 billion from domestic power sales during the stated budget year, it was learned. Various African countries, including Sudan, have expressed interest to purchase electricity from Ethiopia. Professionals from both countries are discussing Sudan's interest to purchase 1,000 megawatts. Similarly, South Sudan, Kenya, and Djibouti have expressed interest to purchase electric power Negotiations have been underway, the office said.
At the very end, I saw a statue about when they celebrated their 100th anniversary or something like that. And the river has two sides. One side is like painted the regional flag, and then on that side is like an Ethiopian flag. So we walked over to that side to just see, you know, and then after that we just went to the middle of the town.
Crocodiles, and I could be eaten. So I can't go near water or near any ponds because I'll get eaten. And as you can see over there, you can see kids swimming, but apparently they know the signs of when a crocodile's coming, and I don't, so I'm not allowed to swim. Kind of harsh, but you know, what can you do?
Welcome back, you're watching Addis News Hour. The Council for Ethiopian Diaspora Action announced that it has prepared a program which enables Ethiopians living in the diaspora and foreigners of Ethiopian origin to visit Ethiopia. Council Public Relations Head Alabacho Desalegn told Ethiopian News Agency that the diaspora will tour the country for 66 days beginning from September 5, 2021. They will visit the Gerd Sugar Beautification Projects and the Gorgora site of the Dying for Ethiopia project. According to him, a program in which the diaspora could put their fingerprints would also be carried out. Besides, they will take part in planting seedlings through the Green Legacy program, it was learned. Council Chairperson Alamayo Ababa said on his part, the tour will create favorable conditions for the diaspora to realize their interest of investing in different sectors in Ethiopia.
This is the main boulevard here, Liberation Avenue.
We are in the main avenue, the Harness Avenue. We are in front of the cathedral that was built in the 1930s. Also this avenue in the old days, back in the 50s, it had more traffic lights than Rome.
Super old Italian cars everywhere on the roads. So we are hitching a ride in a 1963 Fiat? Is it a Fiat?
No,
Renault. What do you like so much about Eritrea? And even many of the people here, especially the older generation, can speak and understand Italian fluently.
La macchina che va dappertutto. A car that goes anywhere.
This car?
Yeah, this car.
That's awesome.
And finally, Sudan sentences death for 6 parliamentarians for the killing of protesters in 2019. 6 members of a Sudanese paramilitary force were sentenced to death on Thursday by a court in the central city of Al Obeid for the deaths of 6 protesters in 2019, including 4 school children. The deaths of the protesters had raised a wave of anger in Sudan, and in August 2019, authorities arrested 9 paramilitaries from the powerful Rapid Support Forces in connection with the violence. On Thursday, Judge Mohammed Rahma sentenced 6 of the defendants to death and acquitted 2 others. Sudan has been led by civil military transitional authorities since August 2019. Men dressed in military fatigue stormed a camp of pro-democracy protesters in Khartoum, and at least 128 people were killed. A commission of inquiry was formed in late 2019 to look into the events, but its findings have yet to be released. Before we go, a quick reminder of our top stories. Political analysts say the US is plotting to restore the TPLF rebels back to power. And political parties call on the international community to take a positive outlook on the current situation in Ethiopia. Well, that's it for the news from me, Solomon Danya, and the rest of the English team here in the studio. Thanks for watching.